Namaskar. Welcome to PK's classes. Today we'll study the types of error in hypothesis testing. You can refer to our earlier class on the hypothesis testing. Hypothesis is a quantitative statement about a population where you assume there is an assumption that we make about a population parameter like mean. So it is not possible to do the experiment on the whole population. We take a sample population and do the experiment. So in hypothesis testing, we test some hypothesis about a parent population from which the sample is drawn. Since it is not possible to conduct the experiment in the whole population, we take a sample population. So there will be a population mean and there is a sample mean, and we can assume that this sample represents the whole population. That means we assume that the sample mean is equal to the population mean. There is no difference between them. Or we can assume that there is a difference between the sample mean and the population mean. So we can have two types of hypothesis. Null hypothesis, where we assume that there is no difference between the sample mean and the population mean, and alternate hypothesis when we assume that there is a difference between sample mean and the population mean. So if we again divide the sample into different groups, so in null hypothesis, say we have divided them into 4 groups, A, B, C, D. So in null hypothesis, we assume that there is no difference between the mean of different groups. In alternate hypothesis, we assume that there is a difference between the mean of different groups. This is the basic difference. So during testing of this hypothesis, we can come across two types of error. One is type 1 error or false positive error, and the other is type 2 error or false negative error. So null hypothesis is true, but we are rejecting it. Null hypothesis is true, there is no difference, but we are rejecting it. We are showing difference. We are showing some positive difference. So it is called false positive error or type 1 error. And the probability of type 1 error is called alpha, which is the level of significance. We can call now alpha as probability of rejecting the null hypothesis or accepting the alternate hypothesis. When the null hypothesis is false, but we are accepting the null hypothesis. Null hypothesis is false, means there is, in actual there is difference, but we are accepting the null hypothesis. We are not rejecting the null hypothesis. That is called type 2 error, and the probability of type 2 error is called beta. In other words, beta is the probability of accepting the null hypothesis or rejecting the alternate hypothesis. And 1 minus beta is called the power of the test. Okay? And if we summarize, suppose the null hypothesis is true, we are accepting it, that means it is a correct decision. But if the null hypothesis is true, but we are rejecting it, that error is called type 1 error or false positive error. Suppose the null hypothesis is false, we are rejecting it, it is a correct decision. But if we are accepting it, null hypothesis is false, but we are accepting it, that is a type 2 error or false negative error. So this is all about the two types of error which occur during hypothesis testing. Thank you.